As the grandson of John Wayne, the author writes his book in much the same way the elder John Wayne acted. After living in Florida until 2010, John and his wife Donna took up residence in Arkansas for the simple reason it made writing his books easier. John's an avid horseman. He has many quotes which come directly through his writing, quotes such as, "A man's dreams must exceed his fears." And how about, "All men are created equal. Equal ends at birth." How about this one? "A gun is neither good nor evil, but a person makes it so. And, as Americans, we can't have freedom without God." If you never met the Duke, you'll come close, having met John T. He's 6 feet 4 inches tall. He fills out much like his grandfather from the movies. Some folks even have a little déjà vu when they see him. John was born in St. Louis, Missouri, August 14, 1958. Lived the majority of his childhood growing up in Missouri. It's interesting, nobody from Missouri calls it Missouri. I think that's correct. Anyway, I'll get a clarification here in a minute. John Wayne, good Lord, man, welcome to Caravan to Midnight. Good to have you here.
Well, it's great to be on your show, John.
Say, I didn't know that, I didn't know all these people came from St. Louis.
Well, just about every outlaw in the Old West either came through Missouri or was from Missouri. The Earp family, all of the Earp boys came through St. Louis during the Civil War. When they saw the conditions on the streets, they moved on. I believe Wyatt is still wanted in El Dorado, Arkansas for stealing a horse.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Cosner's Wyatt Earp. There were a couple of them, you know. There was the one with, Val Kilmer played Doc Holliday, and
Right.
that was kind of the Walt Disney version of it. Everybody liked it because it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
In fact, a guy I knew from Dallas, calls himself Tom Hayden Church, played Billy in the blue shirt, the antagonistic blonde guy. But I thought Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp was actually the most accurate between the two of them. You know, and that whole deal with him stealing the horse. You leave Arkansas, you get on this horse and ride, because if they catch you, they'll hang you and all of that. The warrant still probably is extant out there.
Yeah.
So you're an author and a historian. And,
yes, I study history quite a bit, and I look for the things that haven't been written about, which is how I found out that the orphan problem was buried at the end of the Civil War by the Federals. They knew they had a huge orphan problem. They just didn't want to get beat up over it.
Mm-hmm.
So they instructed all the generals in charge of the large municipalities like St. Louis, Chicago, New Orleans, and New York not to allow the newspapers to write anything that had to do with an orphan situation, the orphan problem, because it was way out of hand. The average family back then was 7 to 10 kids. And all the grown men left to go fight that war. Not all of them, but a whole lot of them did.
And what happened to the mothers?
Well, a mother's not really in a position to take care of 7 to 10 kids.
Yeah, that's true.
And sometimes they are allowed to carry on because they've got some boys in the family that are old enough to take their father's place. But in a lot of cases, that didn't happen.
That's interesting.
So there was a huge orphan problem when the Civil War was over, and when you go back and look for anything to do with the orphan problem in the newspapers, consequently, you find absolutely nothing.
John, I understand there was a huge drug problem after the Civil War too, with laudanum and so forth. And in fact, I have heard, I do not know this, but it seems that first it was morphine, and when that wasn't actually strong enough, that's where heroin actually came from. Is that true?
Well, I'm not certain about heroin coming in from that, but I know that heroin has been around since about the end of the Civil War.
Yeah. It was because of all the blunt trauma. I mean, they had to remove limbs with a damn limb saw, and you needed something that would put somebody under, and that's about all they had, other than a smack on the head with a mallet,
Right. Yeah, it was a tough situation. A lot of men lost their arms and legs, or an eye here, or it was just It was a terrible situation. But we've still got the same situation going on today, just not quite as big of a mass situation. And it's not in this country, although it is our young men from this country. You know, they're going overseas and coming home all beat up.
Yeah, and not getting a very... I'm sorry.
A government that's just refusing to take care of them.
So it appears that censorship in the press and government neglect is nothing new.
No, it's not. It all started, let me lay it out for you if I can.
Please.
Lincoln took us to war in 1861 by declaring martial law. When he did that, he suspended our freedom. Now, for 4 years, we fought. We fought and we fought. George Washington warned us in his farewell address that there were unprincipled men of ambition who would do anything to assert our freedom, to get us back under the British Crown. And when the Civil War happened, the Crown saw its opportunity, and it took it. Abraham Lincoln wasn't assassinated by a lone wolf. That assassination was done for the Crown of England. But it isn't just the Crown of England. The Jesuits are involved deeply too. And when you put the two together, you know, they took our freedom from us 150 years ago at the end of the Civil War. Now, that's a little disturbing to me because I grew up thinking I was free.
Yeah, a lot of us did.
Yeah, I thought we had freedom in America. However, in the year 2016, we're still under martial law from the Civil War.
Is that a fact?
Yes. When you see that yellow fringe around the flag behind the president,
You read my mind.
that indicates we're still under martial law.
You got to be kidding me. I thought it was maritime law or admiralty, whatever.
Martial law.
Martial.
Yes, sir. Now, the maritime law is what they installed at the end of the Civil War because we are now being run by a corporation out of Puerto Rico.
We're being run by a corporation out of Puerto Rico.
Yes, sir.
Please explain.
That's what they set up for us. They couldn't collect taxes from an American citizen born in America. It flies against the Constitution. However, the Constitution was suspended when Lincoln took us to war. That's the whole key to all of this. He took us to war in 1861 and suspended our Constitution. It's still suspended. So when you see the Chief Justices up there trying to make a big decision on whether gays and lesbians can get married and this and that, it's just a show. It's a dog and pony show they're putting on for the American people. We haven't had our Constitution for 150 years. However, what they did is they set it up so that when you're born, you get a birth certificate, and that birth certificate has your name on it in all capital letters. You're registered with the Social Security Administration. It's taken them years to set all this up. It didn't happen overnight. But once you're registered with the Social Security Administration, what they do is they send that birth certificate to the Secretary of the Treasury for the state of Puerto Rico. I'm sorry, what's Puerto Rico got to do with anything?
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, that's where the corporation is based. Puerto Rico, Guam, and D.C. is all foreign soil. That's why that 10 square miles of the District of Columbia is there. So they can get away with doing whatever they want to the American people, and then there's no accountability. Now, what they did, once the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico gets that document, he creates another document in your name, and then, of course, it becomes your Social Security card, and it's in all capital letters. If you take out your Social Security card and look at it, it's probably in all capital letters. Some of the old ones aren't, but it's before they got everything in place. And when I say old, folks that are 70, 75, 80 years old, because they just started Social Security way back then. But they realized that they had to set it all up in all capital letters in order to make you into a corporation. A trust or a transmitting utility is what you are considered. Okay, that allows you to do business with the money that you put in the bank. However, every time you make a deposit in your bank, it goes to Puerto Rico and back to your bank account. And in that way, they're allowed to charge a tariff.
Is that a fact?
And that is your social, that becomes your income tax.
That's very interesting, John, because I've had a Social Security card for a long time. I still have the original one. I never had to have it replaced or any of that. I got the original one. And it's all in caps, brother. It sure is.
I've got mine in my pocket, my original one from 1970.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in capital letters. But that's what they did unknowingly. See, they told me when I started work way back in 1970 in Branson, Missouri, they said that you have to have a Social Security card to go to work. Now, back then, the folks from Social Security came down to the workplace and met us there and filled everything out and gave me my card, and I went to work. Now, they're not on the road like that anymore. They don't have to be. You get the card the moment you're born now.
Yeah.
And whether you know it or not, you have a contract. You see, they set up this contract with you before you're of any kind of an age of knowledgeability or awareness. You've already got a contract. But your birth certificate is something that they use to trade with. The federal government takes every child's birth certificate that's born today and says, okay, we had another 10,000 kids born today, and guess what? We're going to borrow some money against them.
Now, here comes the inevitable question, John.
Yes.
How do you know this?
Well, I've got some documents that I came across that are pretty interesting. However, to simplify matters for you, this is a book called Re-Inhabited.
All right.
It's been written by some friends of mine. Their names are David and Jean Hertler. And this book really explains in detail all of the things that I'm talking about here. But there's also a thing called Shinola Law.
Shnoa?
Shinola.
Shinoa.
S-A-I-N-O-L-A.
Okay.
All right. It's a law form that was put in place at the end of the Civil War. Now, every attorney in the country takes an oath to the British bar. Why the British bar? I thought this was America. Well, part of the 13th Amendment stated that no attorney would take an oath to a bar. That's why they took the 13th Amendment out of the Constitution like they did when they did it. And they put this all in place. They set it up. But part of the oath that every attorney takes says that they will do their best to take America apart piece by piece. And it's hidden in that oath, but if you go back, if you read it and break it down, every attorney that's ever taken an oath to the bar has taken an oath and said that. That's disturbing in itself.
Yes. Certainly.
The other thing that's disturbing is the Jesuits are devoted to taking America apart piece by piece.
Who are those guys, John?
That's directly an affront to my freedom.
Let me ask you, who are, hold your place because I don't want to break your train of thought, all right? But who are the Jesuits? What are the Jesuits? I've heard that they're the muscle arm of the Catholic Church. I've heard all kinds of stuff.
The Jesuits are a secret order of priests in the Catholic Church. Okay? The problem that America's freedom presents for them is it means they're not needed. You follow me?
So far, yeah.
Okay. That's why when in their establishment of the Jesuits, they cannot allow America to succeed as a self-governing entity for freedom.
Because
it flies in the face of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church wants to be that.
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
a direct conflict with everything the Catholic Church stands for.
Is that why we see so much of Pope Frankie now out pushing these various agendas from baptizing aliens right on down the line? I don't mean the ones from across the border either. I mean the ones from off planet.
Yeah, it's across the whole planet. I mean, the things that they're doing now between him and Obama, what they're doing now, they've really taken the gloves off. They don't care if the American people know or not. They have begun their last advance to destroy the remnants of any kind of social freedom in this country. And I never believed in my lifetime that I would ever see the American people elect a traitor or someone that did not have the interest of the American people at heart.
Yeah,
But that's exactly what they've done.
particularly somebody, the identity of whom we don't even know. Except
Right.
that, he's a CIA construct, obviously. How hard can this be to figure out?
Well, I've seen like his birth certificates belongs to some guy up in the Northeast, up in Connecticut, or a Social Security number anyway. I don't know if the birth certificate isn't real. I can look at his birth certificate and I can tell you something about birth certificates. It says African American.
Yeah, they didn't use that term when he was born, did they?
They didn't even use that term in the 1960s. It wasn't until the late 70s till that became vogue or, the standard. In 1961, they would have used the term Negro.
That is
And-
correct.
So the birth certificate's not even real. So there's just so much about this man. He's a complete imposter. He's an affront to anything that American people stand for. He wants to bring in nothing but a bunch of radical Islamists to destroy what's left of this country. And unless we check him and put a stop to it, if we follow through and put Hillary in the White House, we can kiss America goodbye.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. So let's retire one more point, John, and that is, I have said this. The Civil War wasn't fought about over slavery. That's the last thing on their minds. The Civil War was fought to centralize the power in Washington and Boston.
Right.
Am I close?
You're absolutely correct. You see, the North lost the war as well. They fought, and by all accounts in our history books, it says the North won, but they didn't. They lost. Every state in the Union lost its sovereignty to the federal government, not just the South. So what you have is the North fought hard and diligently. They won the battles, but they lost the war because they had to surrender their sovereignty to the federal government, just like every other state in the Union.
And then, let's just drop in a little tidbit here. Who were the regulators?
Well, most of them were Jesuits.
Is that a fact?
Yes. Look, we're still being reconstructed 150 years after the Civil War. That's what this mess is all about. They want to take God out of any mention of God out of anything. Our country was founded on God. And virtually all of the founding fathers believed in God. But before I get away from it, the Civil War, you said, was not fought over slavery, and it wasn't. Lincoln didn't introduce the Emancipation Proclamation until 1863, 2 years into the war. And the only reason he did that is because he needed to do something to get his soldiers to fight. Because up until then, they had been losing badly at every turn. He had to do something. So he declared freedom for the slaves. That's the only reason he did it. He had no intention of destroying slavery at that time, but he had no choice.
Wow. Yeah, it's like I say, John, you think you know, but you don't. You think you know what you're talking about, but you don't. So you go to the books, the old ones.
Right.
And you go, wait a minute, I didn't know what I was talking about because I didn't know. So what do you make of all this? I mean, this may be just some irritating fluff, but what is it with the first, the stars and bars of the Confederacy? That's a racist symbol. I would think anybody with an IQ over 40 would, if they chose to view the Civil War having been fought over slavery, would look at it as a flag of victory over slavery. But instead, no, it's a racist flag. Now I'm hearing that the stars and bars is also a racist flag. Have you been picking that up lately?
Yeah, I've heard that, but it's not a racist flag. The racism is in the hearts and the minds of the American people that are calling it racism. Okay?
Yeah.
They're pointing the finger at themselves.
Well, just like liberal progressives. They hate themselves.
Right.
That's why they spew the vitriol that they do. I mean, that's
absolutely right.
That's just how I see it.
I've seen it in people's lives where they become so successful that they're ashamed of what they have because they have so much, and they look around and see so many people that have nothing. You know what? You need to realize that God's blessed you for a reason and accept it. You know, profit is not a dirty word.
No.
Profit is not evil. Profit is God's way of saying, good job, my son. You've done good.
Every significant figure in the Bible had a pretty nice bank account, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, King Solomon was the richest man that ever lived. And Job wasn't too bad off himself, you know. And I mean, you name it. They were all pretty well equipped financially. God bless them, you know. And when you stand up for what's right, when you stand up for God and the truth, God will bless that. And we've gotten away from that in America. We haven't taught our children the message of God and how He works. You know, the last 3 years on Father's Day in church, I've been the youngest father present. I'm 50. I'll be 58 years old in two months. And I'm thinking, there's something wrong in America. There's definitely something wrong.
Yeah.
I know there's younger fathers out there than me. I've got 7 grandkids, for crying out loud. But they won't go to church. The young people just don't feel it's necessary. Or they feel, you know, they take the stance, well, you know, I don't want to go to church because that's where all the trouble's at.
Yeah.
Or there's just a bunch of hypocrites in church. Well, you know what? We've always got room for one more. I actually haven't been going a lot myself lately because I'm on the road a lot on the weekend. But, you know, we need to start a revival. We need to get America back to understanding that you can't have freedom without God. And the American people, they're just, right now, just a bunch of loose cannons with no direction. And the people we have running things aren't helping any.
No.
They're not helping matters one bit. They see that we're on our knees and they're fixing to finish us off if we don't do something.
You know, interestingly.
If we don't take the knowledge that we have and learn from what's happened, you know, why do you think they made Ulysses S. Grant president? That man had no shot of being president. He was the biggest drunk the Army had.
Mm-hmm.
They got him elected. Why Ulysses S. Grant? It's because they knew they could get him to sign anything they wanted.
I believe it. I mean, wasn't this guy like almost permanently poop-faced?
Yeah, he stayed. He's always had a drink in his hand. They knew they could get him to sign anything they wanted. All they needed was to talk to him for a few minutes, and anything would make sense. And that's the way people that drink a lot are.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, we have a lot of laws that were passed by his administration that really have forced the situation. You know, it was 1871 that the United States became a corporation. That was under his tenure. Now, originally under Lincoln, he had no choice but to suspend our freedom and force the Union back together. In order to do that, he created somewhat of a corporation, but it wasn't a legal corporation until 1871 under Ulysses S. Grant.
That's a little bit disturbing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, hey, bartender, give us a drink. It's like, here, General, we need for you to sign you this. Go ahead, get him a drink. Water him, will you? Okay, that's crazy. But then again, it doesn't really. I've heard of his. He was a notorious alcoholic. Of course, that term wasn't even used back in those days.
Well, yeah, it's not a lot. It's not news, except that when you consider they made him president of the United States.
That's even better. Here, Mr. President, sign this. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man.
You know, the U.S. in 1871 became a corporation owned by the British Crown and the Vatican, jointly owned by those two entities. You want to know why we can't get anything done in Washington?
Yes, right now. Tell us.
It's because we have no say. The American people lost their freedom 150 years ago. We've been saddled with millions of statutes and codes that we have to follow that were put in place by the Vatican and the British Crown. That's why every attorney in this country takes their oath to the British bar. I'll tell you, I'm a little fed up with it. I don't think we need to elect another lawyer to office.
Yeah, I wondered about that. You know, what is it with this lawyer? I think you've just answered that question. You know, they may go on and have their licenses suspended later, but they start off as lawyers, don't they?
You know, in essence, as Americans, we have been born into slavery, not freedom. The most valuable slave anybody has is a slave that doesn't know he's a slave.
Absolutely. Well said.
Okay? And that's what we are in America. We're slaves to the federal government, and it is being run by the Vatican and the Crown. Who used to go around the world building forts everywhere and getting in skirmishes with, you know, countries and people they didn't know anything about?
That would be the British.
Right. Who does it now?
We do.
Exactly. They don't have to do it. We're their long arm. We're doing it for them because they run our country. Britain doesn't have to engage in any of it. They've got us doing it for them.
So are you suggesting, Mr. Wayne, that England is still running us?
That's exactly what I am suggesting. And when we went to war, they saw their opportunity to place us back under the British Crown. Now, we fought the Revolutionary War to get out from under it. George Washington warned us in his farewell address that there were ambitious and evil and conniving men who would do whatever they could to place us back under the British Crown. Well, our freedom lasted about 70 years, and during the Civil War, we came out of the war only to be placed back under the British Crown. That's what the Federal Reserve banking system is all about.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's run by the British. It isn't run by Americans. It's the British Crown.
Elaborate on this as much as you will.
Well, they attempted 3 different times to set up a central banking system for the United States, but they were not successful until they set up the Federal Reserve in 1913. Okay. I've got a book, I think it's called The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Oh, yeah.
Goes into detail on exactly what they did to us. But it placed us in servitude to the British Crown if completely, because it gave our money to them. It allowed the bankers from Britain to, and this is a banking cartel. That's what it is, just like a drug cartel in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's a banking cartel. And what they do is they take our money straight off the printing press. They buy $100 bills, $50 bills, and 20s. They buy it for 4, 6, 8 cents a piece. And then lend it back to the federal government at full face value. I'd like to have part of that deal.
Mm-hmm.
But consequently, we don't have that deal. You know, in 1933, the federal government found itself in crisis. But it didn't really. It was a fake crisis. They told the whole world, we're going to go bankrupt if we don't do something. So they got every governor in every state to sign on to ensure. Okay, are you with me?
Yep.
To sign on to the good faith and credit of the American people to back the federal government.
So basically, we're the currency.
They sucked us in right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They got the American people. The federal government, since then, has looked at us as nothing but, and well, even before that, that's what they were after. The American people and everything you own is nothing but an asset for them to manage from cradle to grave. That's all they wanted. They wanted us under the thumb and in servitude to the federal government. And that's where we're at. That's where we find ourselves today. We can't do anything without the federal government wanting a piece of it. And they'll come and take it all if they, we're still under martial law. They can kick your door down and take everything you have and leave you with nothing. And there's not a thing you can do about it. That's the scary part of all this.
All right,
and the president we have nowadays, I see him setting everything up to do that. There's going to be a complete disconnect between our military and the people.
Yeah.
Because they're bringing so many foreigners into the military. And where do you think they're coming from? The Middle East.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a couple of decades, maybe 3 decades, just that I know of.
In the Middle East, it's scary.
Yeah.
They're not beholden to us at all. They didn't grow up here. They don't care anything about us. They're going to do what they're told. In our founding documents, they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with, by their creator, with certain rights. That among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, the inalienable rights were never bestowed upon the black population. All they got coming out of the Civil War was civil rights.
Yep, that's right.
And they don't realize that. You tell them they're not free and they look at you cross-eyed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the facts. They never have been free. Consequently, along with that Civil Rights Act of 1865, those of us who had inalienable rights lost them. All we have now is civil rights. It's the whole thing's just a tragedy that's been played out over the last 200 years. And we, the American people, have got to stand up and take our country back.
I want to make sure everybody hears this, John. They got civil rights, but they did not get what?
Well, they did not get inalienable rights to be free men upon the land.
Okay, you got it, everybody?
There's two different things there.
Yep.
The inalienable rights is what we were guaranteed in the Constitution. But if you recall, the Constitution was suspended when Lincoln took us to war.
This
Has been suspended ever since.
This is so strong. Now, don't lose your patience here, but just recapitulate on this one point. What was at what point after what was the crossing the Rubicon moment at the end of the Civil War? Just one more time. What happened that stripped the freedoms from the people?
Well, what happened was they assassinated President Lincoln.
Yep.
What happened was they saw their opportunity. They knew Lincoln was going to bring the southern states back in and reseat the full House and Senate, and that he was going to allow the states to keep their sovereignty. They didn't want that. That's why Lincoln was assassinated, and they took charge from there.
Well, was it because it was a logistical and clerical nightmare to have to deal with each individual state? Is that basically it? So they wanted all those eggs in one basket?
Lincoln gave them all the states back.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't reseat the South once the war was over. It was years before the South was reseated in its rightful place. However, if you can follow me here, up until the Civil War started, we had a de jure government, a republic. You with me?
Yep.
It was considered a republic.
Oh, yes. Yep.
All right. The last president under the republic, the original de jure republic, was James Buchanan. Lincoln was elected and took us to war. Now, Lincoln declared martial law because so many of the states in the South seceded and he wanted them back in the Union. Which brings up another point. There was a couple of New England states that seceded 4 times before the Civil War, but they always came back. Why was it necessary to go to war with the South? I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Mm-hmm.
Because they allowed the New England states to come to their senses and just come back naturally.
Yeah. So what was behind firing on Fort Sumter exactly?
Right. What was behind that?
Yeah.
So, but on another note, I don't want to get off track here.
Okay.
The South was never reseated when the war was over. Okay? Consequently, because the corporation was set up, what we have is a huge group of a board of directors called the House and the Senate. And it is not our rightful government. What we have is a government, a foreign entity based out of Puerto Rico, telling the American people how to live. They're passing laws. They make it seem as though it is our real government, and it is not. Our house was vacated during the Civil War. The Senate seats, the seats for the congressmen, they were all vacated. Okay? Because of that, we haven't had any representation in Washington, D.C. We've had nothing but an empty house for the last 150 years.
Well, this makes good sense, John Wayne. I'll tell you why. How about how about all except Martin Van Buren, who had Dutch roots? Every president that we've ever had in this country is part of the lineage of King John Plantagenet. Period. End of story. And it took a 12-year-old girl to crack that code. That's right. The women are smarter. Unbelievable. The villain depicted in the Robin Hood tales, that's John. That's King John.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. Every one of them. Go ahead, sorry.
That's a sobering thought.
Isn't it? And now I think we understand why that is. I think now we understand why, John, the problem is we're so slow to catch on. It seems to me that when you have these aha moments, some kind of corrective action, some kind of action, it's like, let's do something, even if it's wrong moment, occurs once you get this information. And yet, no, people just sit there like slugs on the sidewalk, waiting for some kid to come by and pour salt on them and geek off. I mean, literally, I sound like I'm trying to be funny here, but I'm really not trying to be funny. But what does that tell you if every president but one who had Dutch roots all come from the line of King John, the guy who gnawed the table over the Magna Carta, supposedly?
Yeah.
Absolutely astounding. It really is.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Anyway, carry on.
One of the laws that we have in this country in the Constitution is that no royalty can hold office, and that's why we have no royalty. On another note, though, I think that Grandpa is as close to anything royalty this country's ever going to see.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Here's the thing.
He was a true American.
Yes, he
believed
was.
in God and he believed in his country.
And they love to call him a racist, too, even though the only thing I ever saw that he said, which made perfect sense to me, is like he didn't have a problem with blacks being in positions of power, but he wasn't prepared to turn it over to them until they had developed and brought themselves to the point where they could participate in these things. Because he knew where they had come from. He knew that they had been, in some ways, completely dispossessed. And he just said, yeah, it's okay with, I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, it's okay with me. I just need for them to have developed educationally and otherwise until they're responsible enough to do it. He goes, I'm not just going to turn it over to some people who've been held back this long. I mean, that's effectively what it said. I don't see anything racist about it. It sounds much more logical than racist.
Well, it is logical. Let me show you a little something here that I have. This is 50 black state representatives, which were either from 1868 to 1893, and that's just from the state of Arkansas. You want to know why you couldn't get a white person in the Congress at that time? They
Yes.
wouldn't let us back in. You couldn't find a Republican in the South at that time.
Is that a fact?
They couldn't reseat the seats. So all these laws that they were passing, they passed with half of the Congress, half of the Senate, because the South wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
We were under Reconstruction, and they wouldn't let us come back to the table.
Reconstruction, that's what they called it.
Yeah. Well, if you'll allow me a moment here, this is a book I just released. It's called Captain Grimes, Unreconstructed. He was the Confederate mail runner for the South. He was also Mark Twain's best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Both were riverboat pilots from Hannibal, Missouri. If you want to see how federal overreach really got started, that's a very good book to start with. Because they couldn't get a riverboat pilot. They had to literally put a gun to the heads of the riverboat pilots to get them to do anything. They were all secession.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way the North could get anything done was through brutality. That's what war is. I mean, I hate to say it, but war is brutal.
Plenty of murder and rape and craziness to go around, wasn't there? Burning people's houses down, killing their kids, shooting the husbands in front of the wives, shooting the wives in front of the husbands, all of that.
Yeah, this book was based off of memoirs from Captain Grimes.
Yeah.
So it's really a first-hand account. It's just part one. Part two will be out in the spring. But it really lets you get a good look as to what was going on in the middle of the Civil War. And it's kind of from a Southern perspective. I think after 150 years, it's time for another opinion.
Yeah, I think it is too. And when you consider the kings and queens of England, the primary the primary, number one job of those who sat on the thrones of England was the defense of Christendom, right? Supposed to defend the defense of Christendom.
Yeah.
Christianity and all of the lands that were Christian lands. Now, when you take the second part, which is that the king and queen were regarded as second only to God himself. Therefore, wow. Therefore, whatever they did was okay. Because God's right over there.
That's the way our federal government operates.
Mm-hmm.
See, that 10 square mile zone called Washington, D.C.,
yeah.
anything they do inside that 10 square miles, they have complete immunity for. They don't have to answer to the American people.
Yeah.
And I, for one, am a little fed up with not being represented.
Yeah, well, I'm more than a little fed up. You're steadier than I am, you know. By the way, just as a little anecdote, I identify myself as a Missouri-born Texan, although I have not released the city where I was born. Most people think I was born in Fort Worth. I wasn't. But I will also tell you that some of the Wells girls married in to the Earp family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And as I am considered to be an outlaw myself in the communications business, I guess it just it's not necessarily in the blood. I think it comes from the land, you know. Arthur in the land, John B in the land, John Wayne in the land, Earp in the land.
I've got quite a story there myself. I married a girl from Texas, and it turns out she's the great-great-granddaughter of Wild Bill Doolin. And that's an outlaw that rode with Jesse Gaines.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the short of it is, he was brought in draped over a saddle by Marshall Heck Thomas. And Marshall Heck Thomas was who they molded the character Rooster Cogburn after.
Is that right?
In the movie True Grit.
Mm-hmm. Actually,
the book. They made the movie based off of the book written by Charles Portis.
Well, that's pretty cool.
So it all comes around in a big circle.
Yeah, you know, it's that, I'm not sure it's even 6 degrees of separation. I think it's more like 2, maybe 4. Yeah. Well, so John Wayne, I take it outside of some sort of a French-style revolution, there's not much going to change. I take it that's why Donald Trump is being vilified as he is, because he's not part of the club. You know, when you hear all this stuff about George Bush and Al Gore are related and Tony Blair is related and all these guys are related, they're all cousins, they are. It's not made up. Everybody starts from somewhere, right?
Right.
And after a while, you get a gene pool that could use a little chlorine. So,
right.
Yeah.
I saw a fellow the other day said that if Trump is elected, I'm going to, and he's one of the higher up Republicans. He said if Trump's elected, I'm going to vote for Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, you're showing your true colors. You're not really a Republican anyway, if you can vote for Hillary.
Well,
I don't know.
Graham and McConnell and all those dudes, they're all cut from the same cloth. Ted Cruz.
They're all drinking the same swamp water.
But this is what really gets me. You know, I've noticed that I have a radio, and I punch around. I listen to some of these guys, some of these national talk show hosts, just to hear what their points of view may be. And one of them is I'll leave it. I spoke about it yesterday, but one in particular is like, if you're looking for support for Trump from me, you're gonna have to go somewhere else. He was for Ted Cruz. Yeah, Ted Cruz, whose wife is a Goldman Sachs girl, part of the Council on Foreign Relations as well, and Ted Cruz's father was linked to the Kennedy assassination. Cuban. So the question becomes, well, Mr. Talk Show host, if you don't support Trump, then who do you support? Because the nominees are going to be Don Trump and Hildebeest Clinton. Hildebeest Clinton, who has made what I think the report yesterday that I read was $40 million from states, foreign states, that sponsor terror. Then you look closer and you realize we are the ones who are sponsoring terror.
Right.
All over the world. ISIS is USIS. So that means that attack by ISIS was actually us attacking us.
Well, you know, George W. Bush may not have been the greatest president, but he locked up the terror funds and made it where those guys couldn't get anything. He had them on their knees. And then we got Obama. Obama released all those funds, and he has been, since then, he's done more. He's not only released those funds, he's been funding the terrorists with our taxpayer money.
I mean, do we think that Mr.
He's gone?
Sorry, I missed that. I stepped on you. What? No, I'm sorry. I stepped on your last comment. Didn't mean to. There's a little delay here. It's making it uncomfortable.
Okay.
So what'd you say?
Well, what I was saying was that, you know, Obama released all the funds that George Bush had secured and locked up.
Yeah.
He released all those terrorist funds. And then since then he has proceeded to fund terrorism with our taxpayer money.
Mm-hmm.
Billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know?
And he bows to the king of Saudi Arabia, and he bows to this one, he bows to that one. It's just the most ridiculous display I've ever seen a president put on.
Well, the amazing thing to me is that he can do this in our face and not be impeached or hung from the yardarm somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The man's an absolute traitor. I'll call him a traitor to his face. If I ever meet him, I'm going to hit him right in the mouth. But I doubt I'll ever get that chance.
I'll hold him. Just don't miss. Because you're a big
he's
guy.
the biggest traitor we've ever had in this country. You know, when I joined the Marine Corps at the age of 17, I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. We never thought about domestic enemies back then. I didn't realize we had domestic enemies, but we've had them for a long, long time. And they're entrenched in our government. When the American people can elect a traitor and a domestic enemy to the office of the highest office in the land, the office of the presidency, we got a big problem. And they're fixing to do it again, I'm afraid.
Do you think that Clinton will actually get in there?
Yeah, I don't see any hope for Donald Trump. I mean, I'll vote for him because I can't stand the idea of having Clinton for a president. She's going to give the country away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Obama has tried to spin us into bankruptcy, but he didn't realize how deep the American people's pockets really were. We're not going to get a third chance. Hillary's going to finish us off. Once that's done, we won't have any choice but to accept whatever they tell us as far as world currency, how we have to live, you name it. Because we're going to all be standing in lines like the people down in Venezuela waiting for food.
Well, the words of Howard Hughes come to my mind right now, but I won't use them at this moment. It's what do you do when you live in a country like this and it's fallen apart? There's no rule of law. There's no constitution. It's obvious to everybody they don't. They trample all over the Constitution every day. And in fact, if you're pulled over and they see a pocket Constitution in your car, they'll start asking you dumbass questions like, "Are you a sovereign citizen?" You know, to which my response would be, "Are you a sovereign idiot?" Which is probably not the best thing to say to somebody who's wearing a badge. But, I mean, when did it become, when did loving your country and believing that the Constitution was the law of the land, when did that make you an enemy of the state, John?
Well, it happened under Obama.
Yeah. Who has, by the way, folks, imported 1 million Muslims during his presidency. Muslims and Islam, completely incompatible with Western civilization, in my opinion, and in the opinions of many, many others. But Obama just keeps doing it. He talks about gun control, but he leaves the borders open. He talks about gun control, but he admits a million unvetted, undocumented, in most cases, Muslims. And I repeat, leaves the border open. And by the way, give up your guns so that this incompetent excuse of a president can make you safe. Well, I got some news for you. You're not safe. In fact, you are less safe now than at any other time in the history of this country, including the Civil War. I'll stop. Go ahead.
No, but you're right. You're absolutely right. We're the most unsafe we've ever been, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. You know, when you talk about gun control, the amazing thing to me is it was an armed officer that stopped that man in Orlando from killing any more people. He killed 49 and wounded 53 or something like that.
It's a hell of a shot for one guy.
But it was one guy with a gun that stopped him. They don't talk about that.
No, of course not. But I think there's more to that than we think. I was very suspicious of I found that the line of the neatly lined up emergency vehicles with their lights running, lined up so neatly. I'm suspicious of that. Very, very much so. I don't buy it. You go into a place like that and 10, 15, 20 people can't just rush this guy and smack his head on the concrete. Just can't do it while he's changing magazines because everybody's so scared. John, I just don't buy it. I think it's another Sandy Hook.
Yeah. It's just, there's so much that we're lied to in the media about nowadays. It's hard to decipher the truth. It's very hard to decipher the truth. You've got to look twice and double check yourself. There's so much misinformation out there. And there are actually people out there, my friend Gene Hertler calls them Obama bots, that put out misinformation. They're out there just assimilating misinformation all over the internet for people, and it's just a pack of lies. There's no truth in it. But there's a whole lot of people being led astray by that misinformation. In America, it's just we're in a very troubled time, folks. If we don't do something to get our country back, we're going to just be a footnote in history like Rome and Greece. Some of the ancient civilizations, we're just going to be a footnote in history, and America won't exist anymore.
It's a sad, but it's a good place to stop for just a minute, get a little leg stretch, glass of water, and we'll resume in a few minutes after this beautiful musical interlude. Our guest is John T. Wayne, grandson of the Duke himself, John Wayne. A conversation with Mr. John T. Wayne. I got to tell you, John, what you've been saying today, you're saying in a way two things. A lot of people have not heard this information. They've heard from a lot of authorities, a lot of intrepid researchers, a lot of people who are interested in constitutional freedoms and the preservation of the republic. And some of these points, here and there, you've also brought up, but you put them in a way. I mean, the way you state them is so easily understood. I have a feeling that it's going to resonate. Your words are going to resonate with a lot of people. I mean, I remember all the way back to the early 70s when the flippancy began to really rear its head in these various magazine articles and so forth. And I remember seeing a picture of your grandfather with, some looked like Colt revolvers. And there was some caption there like, I doubt if I could drop a commie at 10 yards with one of these old things. And by the way, everybody, John Wayne never carried a .45. He carried a .38-40, which was the .357 mag of the day, just so you know. Is that correct or not?
I believe you're right.
I have some knowledge of John Wayne lore. But look, all right, let's talk about something else here.
Okay.
The Depression and the 1933 United States of America bankruptcy. Does anybody even know about this? Is this taught under Common Core? I doubt it.
Yeah, it's not. It is not taught to us. Most of the information I've discussed today was never taught in the public schools. It was not taught to me when I was growing up. It's things that I learned in my research. I was blessed in the fact that we lived in Florida for about 10 years, and while I was there, I befriended an elderly lady that had a sale barn, and she had a lot of old books. And I told her I'd work for her on a Saturday if she would just let me pick out a few of those old books. Because what I found was that most of them were from the 1800s. I didn't have anything like that in my library. I wanted to know what the old books said. And I wanted to be able to write like the old writers, because that was prior to radio and television. Back then, books was the only media we had other than a newspaper, just the written word. And back then, if you wrote something, it had to be true, because if it wasn't, they took you out and hung you. Okay? They didn't put up with a bunch of false lies. Today, we don't know the lies from the truth. They'll print anything if they think it'll make money. They don't care if it's true or not. So the standards of journalism have changed, and the printing standard has changed, all because of television and radio. And so I was blessed to meet this lady, and her name was Eunice, and she had this sale barn, and I worked for her for a couple of years, just getting a book here and a book there, or a couple of books, here and there. And I was amazed at the things I was finding in these books. And she passed away, I think it was in 2007. Her son called me and said, if you don't want these books, we're going to throw them out. And I said, well, I'll be right there. She had a house full of books. The books that she had that they were going to throw out were first edition Charles Dickens.
Was that all?
Winston Churchill, Uncle Tom's Cabin from 1850.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they were just going to throw all this stuff out. They're all part of my library now. And I'm thankful that they gave them to me. But I was flabbergasted when I started going through the books and saw what they were willing to just throw out. Unfortunately, I see that all over America. People just throwing books out. That knowledge is gone once the books are gone. Not every book is posted on the internet. I've got a lot of old books that just aren't on the internet. I don't know if people don't know about them. They haven't gotten to them yet, but not everything is available on the internet. Not yet. And I'm afraid if it is, people are just going to throw the books out. Well, I've got a library with several thousand books, and I'm going to keep it. But I have Eunice to thank for that library. And reading those old books is what taught me that prior to the Civil War, we didn't use the term cowboy. There's nothing prior to the Civil War about a cowboy. It all came about during the Civil War. And until I recognized that fact, I never got it. I didn't understand. And I know a lot of people today that write Westerns that don't know that cowboys came from the Civil War. So we've got a lot to learn as a nation. We haven't been taught properly, and we're being taught less and less all the time.
Going back to that old movie Tombstone, Robert Mitchum did the introduction, and he said that it was a group of bandits actually that called themselves the Cowboys. Was that accurate?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of different groups. But a true cowboy. Most of them weren't criminals. Most of them were just hardworking men wrestling cattle.
And that's the long and the short of it. Okay. All right. Now, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm sure everybody else would too on the Federal Reserve. We've spoken with G. Edward Griffin many times about his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and so forth, and how it was a secret meeting and so forth. Everybody took great pains to make sure nobody knew where they were going or what they were doing. As they met in this rather creepy little resort-looking building. Everybody sworn to secrecy. You know, one of those strange rail cars that appear every once in a while in a well-done film. Because that's all we have now. We have, and I'm unfortunately with filmmaking, I wish when it touches on anything historical that people would not take so-called creative license. Because if they'll just stick to the actual facts, it'll wind up being a lot creepier story than if they try to infuse it with creativity, which is actually, you know, I guess they think that they should do it. Maybe they think they do it because they can do it, but I wish they wouldn't. But I digress slightly. How about this Federal Reserve? How did they manage to pull that off and then wind up subjugating the entire population to it?
Well, it was a secret meeting with a senator and banking interests from Great Britain and around the world. And what they did, you know, what they did is they created a banking system. They tried 3 times before to make it happen, but it didn't stick. For one reason or another, the person they put in charge was too powerful. One of the fellows flat, just shut off all the lending for Americans and told them, I'm in charge. And unfortunately, it collapsed once again because of that. It took them several attempts to get it going. But what they did is they redefined the American citizen and made us into debt slaves. In other words, the higher the debt, the bigger the slave we are. Now, the federal government knows that. The people that are running the federal government know that. You would think they would like to pay the debt off, but they don't, because the more in debt we are, the more control they have over us.
You know,
if that makes any sense.
It does. And that's really the long and the short of it. And it's obvious that this is a mechanism that produces an artificial economy, because they can just print whatever they want. They can do this quantitative easing whenever they want. And when they create the dollar bills or the digital money, meaning by a stroke of a pen, then it goes to the big central banks here. That would be Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America primarily. And I understand Wells Fargo is thank goodness, Henry Wells would be happy to hear this, that they're the least of the offenders. They're still in that group, but they're not Chase. They're not JP Morgan Chase. So that's kind of good. It's
There's a lot of money trying to come into the United States right now, and we have a federal government that has a freeze on it that won't allow the money in.
Because?
Well, because it's going to create commerce.
Oh, gotcha. And commerce is not wanted? Commerce
is not wanted right now. They want us on our knees where they can make us accept whatever deal they tell us we got to take. I don't know what's coming, but it isn't going to be good. There is a way to fix all of this, but it's up to the American people to wake up. I myself am part of the original republic, the original de jure republic. Since 2010, we have been working to restore that republic. It's been slow going. We need, You got to get people that understand what's going on. You got to get people that want to save their country. You got to get people that understand, and getting all three of them in the same vessel is kind of hard. But we're working to save our country. We just need more bodies. We need more volunteers from all 50 states. It's republicoftheunitedstates.org. And then there's also a website called republicfortheunitedstates.org. One or the other will get you to the website, but, you know, we're re-inhabiting all the seats that were vacated during the Civil War, when Lincoln took us to war and left the House empty, left the Senate empty. Because what we have running the country right now is a foreign institution with a huge board of directors, and every time we have an election to elect a senator or a representative, all we're doing is installing a new board of directors for that corporation, which has no interest in the American people except to manage us from cradle to grave. I'm a little sick of it. I'm a lot sick of it. We need our country back, and we need to end this foolishness, this martial law that we've been under for 150 years. With the new republic, we can do that. But it's the old republic. It's going back to the Constitution and reinstalling the Constitution, because the Constitution was vacated. And in order to do that, we've got to go back prior to 1861. And we've done that. We're using something called the Northwest Ordinance right now to reconstruct the House and the Senate. And it's not an easy job. But we've got to get it done. And we've really got a limited amount of time to do it, because these idiots running Washington, they're going to run us right into a brick wall, and the wall's not going to move. We're just going to implode.
You know, I think it's worse than that, John. I think they're going to run us right into World War III. Now,
well, and the problem with it is that, you know, they're going to bring the war to us this time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, we'll be dealing with enemies, foreign and domestic. And look at this little puke, Paul Ryan, up there saying that, well, you know, he's endorsed Trump, but if he tries to build a wall or ban Muslims from coming into the country, you know, we would consider suing him. Any president who would exceed his authority. It's like, yeah, well, you know, Paul Ryan, I think you're a liar. In fact, I'm sure of it, because you haven't stopped this president now that your face goes halfway up his backside every time he stops in the hall up there. You haven't done that, have you? So why don't you just get off the stage, pal? I mean, look, John, I've reached that age where I like to take it right up to the line without going over, but I've had it with these liars. I mean, how long does it take for people to figure out you need to adopt the Russian technique of interpreting the so-called news?
Right.
Just do the mirror image of what you're hearing, and you'll have an idea what's really going on. Do you agree with this? Because look, if you don't agree with something I say, I can take a trimming. If I got one coming, let me have it.
Well, what amazes me is that the Democrats have a propensity for always being wrong. And they will accuse everybody else of doing something when they themselves are the ones doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're the masters of it. If you hear them accuse anybody of doing something, you need to know that the person making the accusation is the one doing it. That's how they operate. I just can't believe the American people can't see that. I'm 50. I'll be 58 in a couple of months, and it just boggles my mind that so many people are blind to what is going on. Your Social Security card announces your birth in something called a trust or a transmitting utility, making you into a corporation. And that name represents you in all capital letters. And you, the living person, is the trustee, but the government itself is made the beneficiary.
And this is something this is not just wild speculation on the
No.
part of John T. Wayne. You can prove this, can't you? Mm-hmm.
I've got the documents laying in front of me. I'll be glad to send them to you if you want to read through them.
I would very much like to have them. When we go offline, I'll give you my private email address that only I have access to.
Because every one of us has been made into a seagoing vessel, declared dead or lost at sea, so that they can collect taxes from us.
Oh, Lord. Well, I hope they made me into a submarine. I'd like to sneak up on them and give them a spread of 6.
You know what? I think that's what I need to be, is a submarine. I'll be a little harder to find that way.
Yeah.
But the Internal Revenue Code, everything is based off of this deception that the federal government created. They cloned you, is what they did. They are the largest practicers of identity theft in the world. They've been practicing it for 100 years now. And we don't see it. We, the American people, can't see what they've done to us. You know, the IRS works for the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue, who works for the Secretary of the Department of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. I'm still lost on that. Why Puerto Rico?
Yeah, me too, particularly given the financial condition of Puerto Rico, which is in the toilet, and they're supposed to be, can't bail them out. Now, what kind of sense does this make? Have you been picking that up on the wires lately? Puerto Rico's broke. They're in destitution. It's bad.
Yeah. Well,
But they
Puerto
can't bail them
Rico
out.
probably is broke, but the problem is they'll never be a state. They can never be a state for the United States because the corporation has to operate on foreign soil.
Mm-hmm.
In order for them to collect the taxes that they collect from us. The United States of America has 3 entities, okay? In other words, 3 different accounts to draw from. And you need to know which one the president's talking about when he's giving a speech that day, because you never know which United States of America he's referring to. There are 3 different United States of Americas. Washington, D.C., Guam, and Puerto Rico.
Guam.
And they all have their purpose. But they're all on foreign soil. And none of them can actually be part of the United States. Washington, D.C. is nothing but a huge storefront. A big fancy looking building for the American people to look at and go, oh, that's our government. When in truth, it isn't our government and hadn't been for 150 years.
Well, then who's running us?
Well, like I mentioned early on in this interview, the British Crown and the Jesuits.
Mm-hmm. Just wanted to come back around full circle to that.
It all comes back full circle to that.
Well, let me ask you this now. I don't want to muddy the water here, but maybe I have to a little bit. See if we can stir up some fish. The Jesuits attached to the Roman Catholic Church,
Right.
but the Roman Catholic Church was pretty much kicked out of England, at least on its face, by
Right.
Henry, and replaced with the old C of E. Now, but the Church of England. ... I turn it over to you.
Well, the amazing thing is that neither one of them had the ability to do what had to be done at the time of the Civil War. But together, they did have the ability. You with me?
I am.
They had to create an unholy alliance. And that's exactly what they did. And they've been taking America apart piece by piece ever since, with all of their statutes and codes that they've been implementing. And they've been implementing them for the last 150 years. They're not going to quit. They're almost done. And I think it's time for the American people to wake up and realize that we haven't been free in my lifetime, or your lifetime, or anybody's lifetime. We haven't been free since 1861. You know, it takes a lot of money to be free.
Yeah.
If you're poor, you're nothing but a slave.
Right.
You know, you're a slave.
And so that's exactly why they managed to keep us through taxation and everything else, where we effectively break even. Because if you fail, that's one thing. If you succeed, that's one thing. But if you break even, you've effectively wasted your time. Am I close?
Yeah. You know, the IRS is effectively a collection agency for the private banks. I've never really thought of them as that. I thought they were a collection agency for the federal government,
That's what I always thought.
but they're not.
Ah,
See, it's the banking system that's running our country, and it's the banking system that our government is answering to, and that is the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve's in a lot of trouble right now. A lot of people want to do away with it, and that may happen. But, you know, over the last, when was it, Nixon took us off the gold standard in what, 1972?
yeah,
I think it was 72.
yeah. Or 71, one of them.
Those years, all that gold we had in Fort Knox has somehow disappeared.
Had to be 72, yeah. All the gold. Now, is that a fact? Because people have gone back and forth on the gold stash at Fort Knox.
Well, it's all in Beijing, China now.
Gotcha. Well, that makes perfect sense, actually.
You know, on April 19th of this year, Beijing, China went gold back. Now, they can't do that without gold.
Yeah, true.
Where did they get it? I'll tell you where they got it. They got it from us.
Well, I don't know about very many Chinese gold miners around here.
No, they got it from us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're no longer gold backed as a country. And we haven't been since Nixon took us off the gold standard. And that was the hard part for me to understand. You could elect a huge conservative, American loving man to be president, and they would go and do something stupid like that. Or like George W. Bush creating the airport screeners and making them all a federal agency.
Yeah,
That was stupid.
completely. And now they can't even keep any employees. They're leaving in droves.
Yeah, and I can't understand, why do you do something like that when you're, you know, when you're fundamentally an American and a good Christian man? Why do you do something like that? And I couldn't figure that out. Well, you know, once you get in the White House, you're all part of the same order. You're not really the president. You're just being told what to do by the British Crown and the Vatican. You know, and if you don't do what they want you to do, they're just going to eliminate you.
And they've been doing it for years.
They've been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the thing that worries me about Donald Trump. If he were to win, they're not going to let him be president. They're not going to let him build a wall. They'll have him assassinated just like they did Lincoln.
And Kennedy.
Because he's not part of the good old boys.
Yep.
He's not part of the network, which is all the reason I want him. I mean, still, he's not part of the republic. It's still going to be just another head of the corporation. You know, countries are run by kings and queens.
Yeah.
Okay. Corporations are run by presidents.
Interesting observation.
I'll let that sink in for a minute.
It's okay with me.
Yeah.
I believe you are entirely correct.
That's why we have a president. It's being run by a corporation. You know, the southern states walked out on Abraham Lincoln and left him without a functioning Congress. His only choice was to take us, really to declare martial law and take us to war if he wanted to get a Congress back. What he did, though, is while he didn't in law form a corporation, he did form a corporation and created the Congress of the United States, or a huge board of directors. And it wasn't until 1871 under Ulysses S. Grant that they ratified all of that. You know, so the federal government has been functioning as a glorified corporation ever since. There was a state of emergency that allowed Lincoln to do this. And what we call the government now is actually de facto because it was never implemented by the American people. Executive power is what implemented this government. And you can see executive power run rampant right now with the current president.
So
he doesn't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah, so it appears.
You know, he's doing everything that the Jesuits and the British Crown want. You know, when you have to take an oath to the British Crown to be an attorney, and in that oath it says that you'll do everything in your power to dismantle the American continent and the American form of government. I don't need an attorney for any reason. None whatsoever. You know, and don't ask me what I think of insurance companies.
Yeah, right.
That's on the side note.
Let me ask you this. What do you make of this, you know, the number of illegal alien families crossing into the U.S. has already surpassed 2015. Do you see this illegal immigration, these open borders, as a tool that's being used by the corporation to accomplish something, but I'm not sure what, other than destabilize the economy and create division? Those are the only two byproducts of this action I can see.
Well, I think the only way that the Democrats can remain in power at this time is by stealing the vote. Now, all these votes are counted electronically, and they're sent to a corporation run by George Soros to be counted. I don't understand how in the world we can verify a vote anymore.
Yeah, that little electronic voting apparatus makes it easier, doesn't it?
Makes it easy to steal any election you want. They're going to put in who they want. But we as Americans, you know, we've got to work to get our country back. And that, what I was trying to get at earlier is the republic for the United States is the way to do that. It's our only true law form, and it restores the Constitution.
Maybe what we should do is have these enough states secede from the Union that we get a not a consensus, but we take all of the valuable states out and just say, no, we're not doing it, and go back to their own economies. And then when things are reset up in Washington, D.C., which those borders should be taken away, and that little isolation block that they have there removed, and then go, okay, when we go back to this Constitution, we'll rejoin the Union, and not until, because we're not doing this. I mean, I wonder how that'd go for us. I think we should start with Texas.
Yeah. You know, Texas, I'll tell you, I love Texas. You can still get away with telling the truth in Texas.
So far.
Actually, I say that about the whole South. I had done a quote like that and for Texas, and then I realized, you know what, it's really the whole South. There's a lot of good people anywhere you go in the country, but people don't know what's been done to them.
No, they don't.
Had their heritage stolen from them.
And when you tell them, they don't believe you, John.
When you tell them, they don't understand it. They're like, oh, you're full of it. I'm free to do anything I want. No, you're not. You've got a deed or a title to your home, and it'll be revoked the moment you don't pay your taxes.
It's just like owning a home. You think you're I remember Fred Thompson. He used to do those reverse mortgage commercials. And he'd come on and say, do you own your own home? I mean, like, no, Fred, I own somebody else's home, but go ahead. If you own your own home, you can stay in your own home. It's,
Yeah. Well, the government buys it back from you.
Yeah, you want to find out if you own your own home? Do you own your own home? Yeah, get behind on your property taxes. You'll find out.
Yeah.
No, you don't. How did, this, Mr. Wayne, I have no doubt that everything that you are saying is completely true. I have no doubt. I've heard this now for 2 years, almost 2.5 years. I've been doing this program. And then before that, on Coast to Coast AM, in as much as I was able to talk about anything on that program and did it anyway and wound up getting blown out, which I was delighted to report that day. I could barely keep from becoming incontinent. I was so happy and excited about leaving the corporate apparatus. But the thing is, what's it going to take to turn this around? Because it is getting more monstrous, more brutal. We have this massive surveillance state. Privacy's gone. Your appliances are squealing on you. We had Kitty Worthman on yesterday, a survivor of Nazi Germany. Bless her. She is 92. Yeah, she was 12 from 38 is, in fact, 26. So there you go. And she said, you're marching towards socialism. You give it 4 more years and this country is gone because these people don't understand what socialism is. I've been yelling the C word out there, communism, for a long time. 4, 5, 6 years ago, I was going, this looks like global communism to me. And, these sniveling little weenie liberals are going, that's all you can say is, you want your gun and there's a communist behind every bush. It's like, yeah, and you're part of the problem because you are a dumbass on a spectacular level. You will only realize what's being done to you when your little pathetic throat is being sliced. And I just don't know what it's going to take to get this. I mean, privacy is gone, folks. Your phone would like to have access to your microphone. The moment you click that, it's listening to everything. Put it in the refrigerator at night. That would probably be the best thing to do. Cameras all over the place. These cop cars now have got more stuff stuck on the trunk than they do on the, inside. They got more gear hanging off the back of the thing than they have inside the actual car. They got cameras and they got radar guns and they got license plate readers and all this. I mean, this is insane. This is as insane as any dystopian, insane science fiction novel from the 50s. So what do you do? What can you do?
Well, the only thing we have a hope to do is to restore the Constitution. And in order to do that, we need to stand up the governments of each state, all 50 states. And we need to stand them up. Now, each and every government or each and every state was sent a notice in 2010 that we were going to do this. Every single one of them chose to ignore it. They could have said, okay, we're with you. We're going to be part of the de jure government. But not one of them did. Because they've all ignored it, we have to build each and every state government from the ground up. We're in the process of doing that. But we need good people that love their country, that want to help. We, the American people, have all but ceased to exist. They keep bringing in more and more immigrants from around the world, from Mexico, from Iran and Iraq and everywhere else. We're such a minority anymore. It's just crazy. We're not even going to have a say in anything if we don't fix this. We need to assimilate these folks to what it is to be an American. Now, I don't care if you want to come to America and live, but you better be ready to be an American. I don't want to be under Sharia law. It has no form and no practice in the United States. The federal government is really a corporate imposter that's been in place for 150 years. And that corporation has neither the rights nor the obligations to be our lawful government. So, likewise, all these entities that are our personal entities, like for me, John Wayne, that's not lawful either, the way that they've done it through the Social Security Department and with our birth certificates, because it was a contract that was given to us before we were even aware of who we were. That's not legal. But we take it upon ourselves and we just go with it. We're like, well, we're part of this system. Well, no, we're not. I think it's time for the American people to stand up. You know, we've got to put our country back together. I realize we have a limited amount of time to do it. It's going to take a lot of work, but we're taking any volunteers and help we can do to get it done. And we need all 50 states. I don't want 26 or 27 or 28 states to say, yeah, we got a majority. I want all 50. I want it unanimous. Because when we have 50 states, we can walk in to the White House and say, hand it over.
John,
we have our government back.
John, what do you do about those people who are okay with what's going on now? The give me. They graced the earth with their birth, and now they think that they should have the same standard of living and the same privileges and everything else that goes along with a happy life as formulated in their peanut brains, as everyone else out there who's actually worked for something. Don't you think we may have too many non-hackers to ever get this done?
Well, believe me, that is a possibility. But the fact is, if you want something in this world, you've got to work for it. You've got to go out and earn it. Nothing's going to be given to you. I'm the Duke's grandson. I didn't get anything. Okay? I've had to work my entire life.
So
I had to buy my first car.
So nobody threw a gigantic sea bag full of $100 bills out in the front yard and said, this is from your grandfather?
No. I've got an autobiography coming that explains all of that.
Yeah.
But for 52 years, I didn't know I was his grandson.
Is that a fact? Wow, man, that is extraordinary.
So it's called an American heritage. And the thing that's, to me, is very striking is the fact that the same thing has happened to the American people. They've had their heritage stolen from them. You know, they don't even know what it is to be an American anymore. I grew up in a country where a kid could go outside and play and not worry about being kidnapped.
Yeah, or the mother being arrested and the child taken away because she was neglecting the child by letting it play by itself out there.
Right. Exactly. You know what? We took care of ourselves.
Yeah, we did.
There is something called individual responsibility. Mm-hmm. You know? It's just that, we're not allowed to practice it anymore. In 1913, when they set up the Federal Reserve, they really, that was a knife in our back. That's when they really set up everything so that we could feed the British Crown completely. We broke away from the British Crown in the 1700s with the American Revolutionary War, but we went right back under it. And it's all been deceptive.
That's how it goes.
They didn't come out and tell us in a big news story, you're back under King George. You're back under the British Crown. Why, the American people would have had a fit.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't. Everything that they have done has been a deception. The Federal Reserve is 100% privately owned. It has nothing to do with the federal government.
As people have said, I may be the first one to say this back in the 80s. Maybe not. Federal Reserve is as Federal Express. It ain't federal. It's crazy.
They're playing with words.
Oh, yeah.
Just like family planning is really just an abortion clinic.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood. Yeah, I'm planning not to be a parent.
And Parenthood, all it is an abortion house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We'll eliminate the baby so you can go ahead and be yourself.
Yes.
they don't tell you the side effects of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, one of our own sons went through a point in his life where he got his girlfriend pregnant. She was 15, and he was 16. You know, her family came over and said, "What do we do?" And I said, "Well, we don't get an abortion. We raise this kid, you know." But they thought the best thing to do was to get an abortion. And, you know, our son's no longer with us. He couldn't deal with it. If they don't place any value on life, what's life worth? What's, you know, there's nothing worth living for. And they showed him that life wasn't worth living. There's consequences to this stuff. You know, they don't tell you that side of it.
And who was this young man to you?
What's that?
And who was this young man to you?
Well, he was my stepson, but I consider him my son. I raised him.
Of course. And you use the words, he's no longer with us.
Right. He died about 8 years ago from suicide.
Jesus, John, I'm sorry
They
to
don't
hear
tell
this.
you that. See, they don't want you to know all the suicides that happen because of the abortion. They don't even want to make that connection. And it isn't just the girls that kill themselves. A lot of the young men do the same thing. It's kind of a hard subject for me to talk about. But,
I can imagine but
it's just not, you know, there's a lot of things that aren't right with America. I never voted to allow my tax dollars to pay for abortions.
neither did I.
I never saw an opportunity to vote on that. Did you?
No, neither
No.
did I.
It was just shoved down our throats in the secret, you know, by the secret society. They're putting everything in place to take this country apart, just like they've sworn to do. And I want to put my country back together. If you're with me and you want to put America back together, you know, get on the computer and sign up with the Republic for the United States, because I want to save my country, and I'll lead us, but I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need some good people. And I don't care what they do to me. I've been through so much in my life, I could care less what they're going to do to me. I just want my country back.
So those two sites are Republic for the United States and Republic of the United States?
Yes, sir.
And they're both .coms?
They're .org.
They're .orgs, okay.
.org.
All right, let me get rid of the com. I should have known it was an org, but I didn't.
Yeah.
All right, I got it now.
.org.
Oh, good Lord, man! I tell you, what a sobering conversation. But I think we need to have it. All these idiots running around celebrating Cinco de Mayo, and they don't even know what it's about. Morons out there, you know, thinking Martin Luther King was the first black man on the moon, and Planet X is named after Malcolm. Then you got Mark Dice running around out there. I like Dice because he puts people on, and yes, he doesn't show the smart ones, he shows the morons. And that's good because they have voter registration cards. And even if they don't have one in many cases, like most beautiful state, I think visually and environmentally, I think California is the most beautiful state in the union. No offense to anybody else, but I think it's beautiful out there. And you got Governor Jerry Brown out there.
Right.
He refuses to declare a state of emergency where the homeless people are. I think there's like 50,000 people on the street just in L.A. But, here we go. And you can't get rid of Frankenstein. And can't get rid of him. Just can't be shifted. And why is that, folks? Why is that? Why? Now you know why. When somebody like John T. Wayne comes on this program, now you know why. This program is regarded as dangerous. Wow, dangerous? Why? Is he fomenting unrest? No. Is he trying to start a revolution? Kind of. Is he talking about guns and knives? No. It's because people tell the truth on this program, and if we find out later on they didn't tell the truth, we rat them out for it. And the host doesn't sit here like the Oracle. If I make a mistake, I just tell you, hey, I screwed up. Sorry, this is the way it really was, and I said this, and it was wrong. That's what makes things dangerous. You know what makes you dangerous? Mr. and Mrs. America, if you make or Ms., whatever you prefer, maybe even Miss. is if you make a mistake, you just go to the person you made the mistake and affected them, and you say, I messed up. No, it wasn't them, it was me. What do I do about it? You want to see somebody get discombobulated, the one who was just about to tear you up, and you tell them, I made a mistake, and it's all on me. That will tear people up. It really will. And I think I think we're in short supply of that right now. Try it out. It really works well. John, thanks for sharing that with us about your stepson. I know it was rough for you to talk about. It was pretty rough to hear, but it's truth. And truth is hard to hear. So what? Take it. We can take it, can't we? Because if we decide we can't take the truth, we're gone. We're gone. You don't come back from that. Not ever. You live in a state of denial and delusion, self-delusion. And one day, you're going to have a meeting. You're going to go to your maker. I don't care what you think. Once you've lived it, then you will know. You will go before God Almighty and you will explain yourself. And it's my understanding from a lot of people who know a lot more than I do about the subject, you may in fact choose to go to hell. And it's not a nice place. Could we revisit something, just make sure that everybody knows about it? I think we touched on it a little bit, but if we have a few minutes here,
Sure.
Would you just hit fifth gear here and talk about trusts and transmitting utilities, or transmitting utility?
Yeah, I can do that.
I wish you would.
If you get out your checkbook,
Yes.
folks, and if you look at your checks, let's see if I can get a good look at it. Go to that line there where you sign your name.
Yep.
Take a magnifying glass out and look at that line, and you'll see it's not just a line. It says authorizing signature.
Yes.
Why in the world do you need to make something that small?
Because you don't want people to see it.
Because you don't want people to
But
see
you want to
it.
be legally in the clear, so you put it on there. It's sort of like the disclaimers.
Right.
Yeah, right. I get it.
It's an authorizing signature. See, you were made into a trust and transmitting utility by your Social Security card.
Oh, no.
Okay? The federal government allows you to keep your money in the bank and disperse it and pay your bills and pay the bills that are made and what have you. However, it is their money. It's all their money. I never understood that. I always thought the Republicans were right. That's my money. I earned it. And the Democrats always said, no, that's the government's money. And I never could reconcile that. The truth is, it is the government's money. We're all slaves to the federal government. And the trust and transmitting utility is just what you are. You're allowed to pay the bills for John Doe. You're allowed to represent John Doe. But really, he's been claimed as a lost at sea vessel or missing at sea or whatever. And, you're just representing him. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I'm not certain if that's exactly an explanation of a transmitting a utility or a trust, but it's a real good look at what it is. I mean, you're responsible for paying those bills for that entity.
I got to tell you, I think this is one of the best conversations that we've ever had on this program. Not just because you're the grandson of a great American icon and, frankly, hero, but also because, and mostly because, of the words that you have spoken. You've been so forthcoming in all of this. And I'm not, John, I'm not starstruck, you know what I mean? I lived out in L.A. for a while, and I know enough about it to where, if you're starstruck, knock it off. You're barking up the wrong tree. But I'm telling you, I think you are a credit to your grandfather. I really do, because he was a hardcore, liberty-loving American, and you are too. And God bless you, man.
If my grandfather knew what they had done to us, he would have been in Washington with a gun in his hand. He would have ran him out on. He would have thrown him physically and bodily out of the White House.
Yeah, I believe you're right. And I don't think anybody would try to stop him either. That's John Wayne. Let him do what he wants.
Stop him one bit. He would have thrown them out on their seat, on the seat of their pants, and it would have been a big show. But he didn't know. Just as the American people don't know what's been done to them. He did not know. He just believed in his country. You know, up until the Civil War, the stars were all arranged in a circle. Why are they all in a straight line now?
I don't know. Why are they?
Well, under the original de jure republic, we've arranged them back in a circle. But it's because it's a de facto corporation running the country. They rearranged the flag, and they're using Hawaii's flag as our national flag.
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord. Well, probably the next thing that we're going to see, I am convinced that what happened to the former Republic of South Africa was and is still the test bed for what is going to happen here. And my fellow Americans, the next thing that you will see is this flag going away. I believe the whole flag will go away. What do you think, John?
They're only, the Confederate flag's just a test.
Right.
If the American people will accept the going away of the Confederate flag, there's no need to stop there. We'll take the other flag too. We've got a lot of uneducated people in America now. And they want America to be something other than America. I'm not going down that road. I'm going to stand with my grandfather and with my father before me, and I'm going to be a pure American, a true American. And I want the American people to stand up with me. I'll lead the charge, but I'm going to have some folks that want to do it. And, we've got a chance to save this country, but we've got to we've got to re-inhabit the seats that were vacated at the Civil War.